Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Women of Words. We are Heather and Taya, your hosts, and today we have a very fun episode. We are going to talk about, I was going to say our birth stories, but I didn't birth my children. My cats have different birth mothers. So we are talking about Taya's birth stories. And incidentally, today was Quinn's birthday.
I know.
You guys had a little birthday party for him, and he turned 6 today. So 6 years ago today, you were
Trying to die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And luckily the doctors didn't let you. But so we're going to talk about Taya's birth story. She's got Quinn, her 6-year-old, and Willow, who is 4. And they're both crazy stories. Just, crazy in their own way. So I'm excited to get into this. So, first of all, I'm curious because I don't think I know the answer to this question. We grew up in a religion where having kids was not really encouraged. It was like, that's a big deal and you should not have children, and for various different reasons. Did you always want to have kids?
No, never.
Oh, okay.
It's like that was one of the things we talked about a lot while dating, like never want kids. The first 9 years of our marriage, we said no kids, no kids, no kids.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it's like the internal clock started ticking or something, but we would go to these large assemblies where there'd be hundreds or even thousands of this religion in the same space. And we'd rent out like the Tacoma Dome and stuff, and we'd see people with kids. And that was kind of like, oh, it'd be fun. It'd be nice. And we did that for a couple years. We talk about it after we had these assemblies. And then finally it was like, well, if we did do it, I would like to be done birthing any children by the time I'm 32. And then I want at least 2 because I think only children are terrible. And then, no offense if you're an only child.
Right.
My personal experience with them hasn't been great.
Yeah.
And so then we started doing the math and I was like, well, maybe we should probably start having kids. And it was like, yeah, we should start having kids. So.
Gotcha. And how old were you when you had Quinn?
I was 29.
Okay. Just a baby. And you guys knew you wanted to have 2 kind of close together.
Yes, I knew we wanted to, and I wanted to be done by 32, right? So like we had to do it quick. And I was positive that we were going to have second time infertility.
Yeah.
So I was like, we got to start like today because it's going to take us like at least a year to get pregnant.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Yep.
It took 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, whoops, we have them really close together.
Yeah. Fertile Myrtle over there. Okay. So let's get into pregnancy with Quinn. What was that like? And did you have any trouble getting pregnant the first time?
No. So it took 3 months, and quite frankly, I think it took that long because I had no knowledge of my cycle and like what it was and like tracking ovulation and all that kind of thing. With like, I think women should be more educated, and maybe it's just I personally wasn't, but I think there should be more education about just your cycle in general and how it works. So yeah, I started doing ovulation tests and we got pregnant on the 3rd month. We joke that Quinn is our little Mexican anchor baby because
that's right.
We got pregnant in Mexico.
Did he ask you, does that mean I'm Mexican or something like that?
Yes, he did.
Smart kid.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because he looks so Mexican with his
He looks so Mexican, blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah. Okay, so how was your pregnancy?
It was great. It was great. And as soon as we started talking about wanting to get pregnant, I knew I wanted to birth with a midwife. And so I went to our local midwife, and I remember like interviewing her and talking to her, and she's like, go home and have a lot of sex. And I was like,
excuse me,
what? Like, that is crazy. You just said that. And then I think about it now and like laugh because it was, I don't know, probably 65.
Yeah.
And just the fact that like an old lady just told me to go have a bunch of sex cracked me up. But
yes, that's great. So you talked to her before you got pregnant?
I did, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, when we were like trying to conceive, which is actually recommended. They say to do that.
Okay.
So pregnancy was great. I felt good. I gained an appropriate amount of weight. I've always had low blood pressure. And so they were like always kind of laughing about that, about just how low it was.
Okay. What numbers would you usually have?
Jesus. Like nothing over 100.
Okay. So I want to take this moment for a PSA because I run into patients all the time who their blood pressure comes back and it's like 112/70, and they're like, oh yeah, it's low. That is not a low blood pressure. That is a normal blood pressure. When we say 120/80, let's be 120/80 or less than that.
Yeah.
If the top number is less than 100, then it's low. So you are correct in saying that yours was low.
Yes.
But anywhere between 100 and 120 is perfect. That's great. That's where you should be. It's not a low blood pressure.
Yeah, I'd say I range between 90 and 105.
Okay. Yeah.
Typically. I don't remember what the bottom number is, but something equivalent.
Range. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were looking out for it not to get too low?
Well, it was just something we always noticed. And like they go to take your pulse and you're like, are you alive? Where is your pulse? I'm like, I don't know. It's buried deep in my arm or something. I didn't have gestational diabetes. I felt good. I was working at a very stressful position at the time, and I started getting like ocular migraines which if you don't know, it's almost like I was staring at a light bulb, and then how you look away and you have this like blind spot. I would have that in one or both eyes, which at the time I was doing like quality control for a custom jewelry brand. And so I'm having to look at like these little teeny tiny things and I can't see. And so I'm like doing weird things to try to be able to see it. So I ended up going and seeing my midwives, and they put me on basically bed rest. They told me first of all to like cut stress, and then I got another one and they're like, okay, you need to chill.
So is that related to like higher blood pressure or just pure stress? And like, why were they worried about that in your pregnancy?
Stress.
Just stress. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you like in your third trimester at this point, or no?
Yes, I was just in my third.
Gotcha. So the stress was causing physical symptoms, and okay.
And I started, swelling a little bit, which is normal. And then I went in for my 39-week appointment, and they took my blood pressure, and they were like, oh, that's high. Maybe you're nervous about birthing. So let's do the appointment and then we'll check again. So
do you remember the numbers? Because I went specific.
So I think I was like 140 over 91. Like I was just barely there.
Gotcha.
But because I had tracked so low, they were a little surprised with that.
Right.
And I'll back up just a hot second. As soon as we decided to have kids, I dove headfirst into the birth world. And being slightly on the crunchier side, I would say, hence the midwife. And we watched like The Business of Being Born.
That's a great documentary.
Ricky Lake. It's a great documentary.
Yes, please watch.
And basically it just talks about how, birth has become such an industry and how the U.S. has a very high maternal fatality rate. Yeah. So basically like kind of trust your body. But there was a podcast called The Birth Hour, which talks about all these different birth stories of all different kinds. Everything from like birthing in the wood with deer to every medical intervention you could possibly imagine. And so she runs the gambit of these amazing birth stories, and there's zero judgment. It's more of like, I don't want to say like educational, but it just is really eye-opening. Yeah. So I'd heard all these birth stories, and I had heard the word preeclampsia, but I didn't comprehend it, because in my mind, like I was really tracking on like natural birth, no pain management.
You're healthy, you're young. Like, why would you?
Why would I? So when my blood pressure showed slightly high, we did the appointment. They did my blood pressure again. And again, it was even a little bit more elevated. And so they were so calm, and they're like, could you stay for some blood work? And we're going to do a pee test and we'll do a non-stress test. And I was like, yeah, totally. And so I remember asking them, because both my midwives sat outside the bathroom while I peed. And I was like, y'all are really excited about this. What? And so I asked one of them, like, what are we doing? And she's like, we're worried about preeclampsia. And I was like, okay, like, got it. Kim Kardashian had it registered, noted. And then they did the blood test, and doing the non-stress test, then they got the official that I did have protein in my urine. So it was officially preeclampsia, and my blood pressure was still ticking up. And so they're like, okay, it's official. Yeah.
And you were like, okay, I'll see you next week when I'm hit 40 weeks.
I kid you not. I literally was like, okay, so like what supplement do I need to take? And like she, bless her heart, Lisa just like sat back and was like, no, honey, it's an immediate hospital transfer. And I was like floored. I was floored. Like, Jake was working out on the island, so he had to take a ferry, which are scheduled at certain times, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, I have to go to a hospital. My husband can't even get here to me. Like, what is happening? So, and it was all of my hopes and dreams going up in flames, because I realized I was going to be induced in a hospital, which was everything I had not wanted.
Yeah. I was going to ask, so what was your birth plan? Did you have like something specific, or were you
I wanted a water birth. And I had essential oils, and I wanted it really calm and kind of intervention free. And so that was our plan. Okay. Nowhere near a hospital.
No, nowhere near it being induced.
Right.
Yeah.
So I drove home sobbing, which is funny. I remember they were doing construction, so I got stopped by like the flagger, and I was the first car, and I'm just there sobbing. Oh. And like I can tell he's like looking at me and like, it's just some traffic. Like, like, no, I'm not crying about you.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll let you go in just a second, lady.
Right? Yeah. So I got home, obviously called Jake, and he rushed home. He literally jumped on a ferry. It was starting to pull away, and he ran and jumped on, much to the consternation of the ferry workers.
He was like, I'm coming.
Yeah, coming on.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh.
But getting home and like, calling my family and telling them, and then repacking the bag. And then I started to like really cramp. Then I started to bleed, which freaked me out.
Yeah.
So I called the midwives back, ended up going back in for a non-stress test. And they're trying to find me a hospital to go birth in. And
right. So
yeah,
what was the issue here with going to a hospital?
So at the time, due to religious beliefs, I refused any blood transfusions in the case of an emergency, which you would think is fine. But a lot of hospitals are just not comfortable with that, especially with childbirth. And then adding preeclampsia, you have higher risks of everything. So, and again, I didn't comprehend that. I was like, so what? My blood pressure is a little high. Like, what's the big deal? Yeah. I didn't comprehend the danger that I was in.
So you went home, and the midwives meanwhile are calling hospitals to see who will take you. Okay.
Yep. They said, go home, pack, and we'll call you and tell you where you're going. So when I went in for that non-stress test the second time, they said that I had been turned down by a few hospitals because of that, which I didn't even know a hospital could refuse you. So we ended up getting accepted into UW. So the University of Washington Medical Center in Seattle. So we had an 1.5-hour drive. Jake got home, and we hopped in the car and we listened to comedy radio, which is an interesting vibe when you're panicking.
Right. Like, that's funny, but I'm scared.
we listen. I think, is it Nate Bargatze? He has a bit about shaking the baby. Yes. And we listened to it on the way, where he's like, they talk about in the hospital, like, don't shake the baby, don't ever shake the baby. And then you get home and you're so tired and the baby won't stop crying. And he's like, I think they said now we're supposed to shake the baby. Yeah. Yes. And I remember listening to that and being like, who's shaking a baby? And now I get it. But
sometimes you just wanna.
Sometimes.
No. Okay. So you get to the hospital, and they were waiting for you and was you in?
So they were expecting us. It was, they had all the bloodless paperwork. So we talked about other options that they could give instead of blood.
If you needed it, yeah.
Yeah. And part of me choosing midwives was because I'd never had a male OB. But of course, in an emergent situation, like, I got whatever. Yeah, and it's a teaching hospital, so I really got whoever. Yeah. So of course I got a male OB. And now I'm bleeding. I'm nervous as all hell. And he's like, okay, we're going to do a check to see what kind of meds we need to do to induce. I remember calling him up to the head of the bed, and I was like, I got to tell you something. It's going to be kind of gross. I'm bleeding. And he was so sweet. He's like, oh, thank you for telling me that. And now I'm like, sweet. I can't believe I said that to him.
Right, to the OB.
It's literally his job to be in women's vaginas.
He literally puts a gown on because he gets covered in all the fluids.
So gross. So when they checked, I was 0%. And I think the word brick wall was thrown around.
Great. Wow.
So they started me on a magnesium drip for the blood pressure. And then I started shaking pretty uncontrollably. And then the vomiting started. And it got pretty hard. So I started misoprostol.
Okay. And what is that? How do they give that to you?
They give it to horses. That's like the thing that people talk about. Did they tell you,
we give this to horses, but we're giving it to you today? Is that what they started with?
It's supposed to like ripen your cervix or something.
Okay. Is it inserted vaginally?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think that sounds right.
So we started that. We did 2 doses, and then we inserted a Foley bulb once I got to 1 centimeter, which is a Foley bulb, is they basically insert it up into your cervix and inflate it. And the job of it is to put pressure on the cervix to try to open it up. It's not very comfortable. Then they just like tape it to your leg. And then occasionally nurse will come and just try to tug on it to see if it's doing anything. So the first night, I'm shaking, I'm vomiting, I'm really not handling the meds well.
Is this is this a side effect of the meds, or is it because of the preeclampsia that you were vomiting?
I don't know. My
Okay.
blood pressure was still elevated but stable, but I honestly think it was stress and nerves and anxiety
Yeah.
because it was just things were thrown so chaotic, so quick, and then to feel like I really had no control was really hard. Our nurse that night, her name was Megan, and I'll never forget that because my oldest sister, her name is Megan, and I of course desperately missed her at this time because we had no contact from the religion.
Yeah.
And I remember like thinking like it's a sign, but we didn't believe in signs, right?
Yeah.
But I drew so much comfort from her, and she was such an incredible L&D nurse. Like she was, I told her like this was my birth plan and now I'm here, and she's like, I want to help you stick as close to it as we can, as you're comfortable with, as we adapt. And so she was so encouraging, and I loved that. So through the whole night, it was pretty wretched. Food didn't stay down. My blood work had come back and shown that my sodium and my electrolytes were low. And so they're like, that also might have something to do with how crappy you feel right now. So then during the day, I got a new nurse who I think she had really good intentions. She's like, why are you in here? Oh, you have preeclampsia? Okay. So I was telling her a little bit about the craziness. And she's like, when I was pregnant, I found out I had cancer. And I had to decide if I was going to do chemo or have my baby. And so I put off chemo until I had my baby. And then I did chemo with a newborn. So how are you feeling? And I was like,
Oh my God.
Fine.
Yeah,
I feel
I'm
great.
good. Wow.
I won't complain.
She probably did have good intentions, but geez.
But so I literally was like, I'm good. Go. Why don't you go take a break? You go rest. I'll just.
I'm fine. I could do this myself. Like,
oh my
wow.
God.
That is crazy.
I mean, it's your story, but please don't tell it to a laboring woman. It really downplays our pain.
Oh my God.
So I knew I wanted to do no pain management as well. That was also my goal. Even getting induced, which in hindsight is an absolutely asshat decision. In hindsight.
How long were you in labor?
31 hours.
31 hours. Jesus
31
Christ.
hours. Yeah.
And you're still feeling crappy, and you got the Foley bulb, and did they start Pitocin?
They started Pitocin at 4 p.m., according to my notes. I got in the bath about 7 as contractions started to really ramp up. The Foley bulb came out, which I think it comes out at 3 or 4 centimeters.
Okay.
And then they started the pit. Yeah, the bath was a dream. And that was kind of when we got into like the birthing rhythm. Then we got out, we did some spinning baby stuff because my belly was just like cramping so hard. And then we tried all these different positions, and I was like, oh, hell no. Like they wanted me to sit backwards on the toilet, and I thought I was going to die. Like it was just the most intense pressure and pain. Started asking for an epidural. I was like, I'm so tired. At this point, it'd been 28 hours or 29 hours. I was so tired.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think I need an epidural. And they're like, well, you're 8 centimeters. And I was like, I'm good. Never mind. I can do it.
Damn. At the hardest part.
The hardest part, which, right, that should have been a sign. Typically when women are like, I'm tapping out, is when like you're so close. So started pushing. I was not prepared when in the hospital you start pushing and like Ghostbusters come into the room and like men and women in full on hazmat suits. And I'm like, what's coming out of me?
Lots.
And then there's like this hidden light in the ceiling that comes down, and it is so bright. Yeah, they're like, would you like a mirror? And I'm like, hell no. No.
Yeah. Nobody need to see that, but you did.
Well, then at one point they're like, when I was crowning, they're like, you can reach down and feel his head. And so I did. And I was like, oh my God, I feel his brain. He was born without a skull. It's all squishy. I'm happy to report he did, in fact, have a head. He was fine. A skull. His brain, yeah. I had this cute little nurse, name was like Shaka or Shasta or something. And she brought over a stool and was like right next to me, and she was up on the stool. And I remember asking like, why are you doing that? And she's like, just to get a better view. What I didn't realize is he had shoulder dystocia. So her job was, if the doctor said, she was literally going to like WWE style jump on my belly with her elbow to get Quinn under my pubic bone and out. Thank God she didn't have to do that. But like crowning, they talk about like the ring of fire. I thought it was like a moment in time. not 7+ minutes. There's things like that where you hear about them, but I just didn't fully comprehend it.
Right. And why would you think to ask? Like, is that just a moment?
How long?
Yeah.
Right.
How long does that last? How long did you push for?
An hour 15 I pushed. So then he came out, his electrolytes were messed up because of mine. And so I got to do skin to skin immediately. I got to latch him. I got to do all that. But they were concerned about retained placenta. First of all, they dumped a bag of Pitocin in me because of the preeclampsia. They wanted to get my bleeding under control quickly. And again, because of not accepting blood transfusions, they were hyper aware of that. So they gave me a shot of fentanyl in the leg and they went in and did a manual extraction, which they had a glove onto your shoulder.
Again, what they do to horses?
They stuck their hand up inside me, and to feel someone tickle your belly button from the inside is really an extremely odd sensation. That was torture.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And they just go in and scrape out whatever might still be in there of your placenta.
Just take out anything they can. I got to snuggle with Quinn for a few hours. They ended up taking him to the NICU because he wasn't stable, right? Like after birth, they're like, we want you to get up and pee and like walk around. I got up and collapsed. So then they had to catch me and put me back in the bed. And they transferred me to antepartum. They wanted me close to postpartum because they just weren't sure what was happening and why my blood pressure was wonky. My kidneys were not doing good things. So they wanted me close. I got all these like renal specialists coming in. They were really freaked out by the fact that I drank a gallon of water a day, which I've done for 10 years.
Yeah.
They ended up giving me salted Gatorade and then restricting my water, which for any woman postpartum, you know how thirsty you are and how much you have to drink for your milk to come in. So that was really hard. So my milk didn't come in right away and I was so thirsty. And I'm swollen. I thought my toenails were going to pop off because of how swollen I was from the preeclampsia. It was so painful. And then I ended up getting a catheter put in. And for 22 hours, I got my blood drawn every 2 hours because they wanted to monitor things. So again, you're trying to recover from a 31-hour labor. You don't get more than a few minutes of sleep. Quinn came back after 12 hours. I did get to go visit him in the NICU, and then he was able to come back with me. Oh, so that first nurse, Megan, ended up requesting to be with us, and we were there for 3 or 4 nights, and every single night she would be there with us, and she was so sweet.
How big was he? He was pretty.
He was small. He was 6 pounds, 5 ounces, and 19 inches. So he was a skinny little thing. And then he ended up losing 10% of his body weight. So when we left, he was 5 pounds, 10 ounces. So like preemie diapers were big on him.
Besides that one few hours or night or whatever and the NICU, he was fine beyond that.
Yeah, they did his bilirubin levels the day we were discharged. And he was 1 point away from needing light therapy for being jaundice. Okay. So they're like, we'll let you go home, but you have to go tomorrow and get his levels checked at the ped. Which the whole time, my midwives were calling me every day, leaving messages. The ped was reaching out and making sure that we were okay. The nurses were fantastic. I didn't get cancer nurse again. The renal specialist eventually backed off, and the attending was like, you can't restrict her water. This is dumb. And so finally I was able to drink. And then of course my milk came in and I started feeling a lot better. Their guidance was you should probably eat some potato chips. Yeah. But then getting home, we were home for 24 hours and bilirubin levels went up. So we had to get rushed to the NICU in Everett, which is incidentally one of the hospitals that refused us. And he had to be in under 4 lights. It's like stressful enough. We just left this crazy hospital experience, driving back down to another hospital, seeing your tiny baby strapped and monitored and in this little tiny bed where you can't snuggle him is so heartbreaking, and your hormones and everything. Jake refused to leave Quinn's side. Like he wouldn't even leave the room to eat. And they have sleeping rooms there in the NICU, right? So I went to lay down, and it wasn't until I did that in that quiet, dark room that I realized my back really hurt, which I attributed to being in an uncomfortable bed.
Labor, having a baby.
But then it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I ended up just absolutely sobbing in that room. And then evidently I was not far enough away from the nurse's station because the nurses heard me. And eventually I got my shit together and I went in to tell Jake, something's wrong. I remember hiding past the nurses because I realized oh shit, they probably heard me. I went into the room and I told Jake, I don't know what to do. I'm in so much pain, but I can't leave my baby, but I'm I feel like I'm dying. Something's wrong. And a nurse came in and, I'm going to cry.
This whole thing is insane. This is why moms are like literally superheroes.
So the nurse came in and she says, Mama, you have to take care of yourself because you're no good to anyone if you don't take care of you. And I told her, like, how am I supposed to leave my baby and drive across the town to the ER? And she's like, Jake's going to stay here. I'm here.
Right.
You have to go. I walk in there and I'm like, 2 hours postpartum. I'm bleeding really heavily. I have extreme pain and I had preeclampsia. And they take me back to the triage and they get a blood pressure cuff on me. And the nurses were like, we have a code. We have a code. And I was like, oh, is that me? And my blood pressure had skyrocketed.
Dang.
So long story long, I had postpartum preeclampsia. I had to be on blood pressure meds for 2 months. And I had a bladder infection that had ascended into my kidney. So I was in a world of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder where you got that.
The catheter. But after that, things got a lot better. When he was there for 24 hours, his levels came down. We were all okay. We got home. I was on blood pressure meds for 2 months. It came down. It was not a problem. And nursing went really well.
Good. Were you, so did they put you on antibiotics, I assume, for your kidney infection?
Yes.
So you weren't readmitted or anything, right? You were just in the ER. They put you on meds and then they let you go. Okay.
Yeah, and the ER doctor I saw was very kind because I was like, just do what you need to do. I need to get back to my baby. And so they were very sweet because they're like, we know you don't want to be here, but we're really glad you came in because this needed to get checked out. You were going to have a seizure if your blood pressure was that high.
Because usually with preeclampsia, they say the cure is to give birth and then you're fine.
Yep.
So not for you. How long were you on blood pressure meds?
How long?
Yeah.
2 months.
2 months,
Yeah.
Did you start to feel better pretty quickly after that ER visit?
Yeah, honestly, like recovering from vaginal birth was not bad at all. I had a slight tear other than my back hurting, which once the meds kicked in, that was fine. Nursing went well.
Question about the nursing and the antibiotics. Was there any issue there with what they gave you?
I requested a safe one.
Wow. So that was Quinn.
Then I was like, let's birth again. That was fun.
Right. Okay, wait. So how old was Quinn when you got pregnant with Willow?
11 months old.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
And you were like, we got to start trying because we're going to have trouble.
We're going to have trouble.
Yeah. So funny story. Me and Taya and a friend of ours all got together for drinks, quote unquote, right around the time that I knew Taya was trying, but she had just told us like we just started trying this month, and she beat us there so that she could order a mocktail because she knew she was pregnant because we were going out for drinks and we were none the wiser. So so he was 11 months, and then you got pregnant again. And was this pregnancy just as easy?
This one was just as easy. It was more stressful because we found out we were pregnant, and 3 weeks later, COVID hit. Pregnancy was great. The midwives watched my blood pressure like a hawk. Had the same group of midwives, and they were amazing. Being pregnant with a toddler is no joke. There was a lot of group naps involved.
Yeah. How was your mental state after having that whole experience with Quinn's birth and afterwards?
It was okay. I was nervous about it happening, but I was also like what else could happen? And again, it just didn't sink in. I hesitate to use the word traumatic birth, but it was really pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And I didn't fully I'm still kind of recovering from it, if you will. There's still aspects that make me cry and that.
Yeah. I'm sure no one would blame me for saying it was traumatic. I'm traumatized just listening to it.
Yeah. So I think having kind of unresolved stuff in the back of my head, but I don't know, the naivety to think it was fine. And then COVID really threw a loop. And I was still listening to that Birth Hour podcast through my pregnancy. And she started getting people's birth stories of their partners not being able to come into the room with them having to birth alone with a mask on. And I just remember sobbing at my table listening to this, oh my God, what's going to happen? And of course, the midwives can't give you an answer because they're we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
We don't know what the regulations are going to be when it's time. But everything was clear. My blood pressure was great. I ended up going into labor naturally at 39 weeks and 5 days. I started laboring through the day. I called Jake and was like, okay, this is real. I need you to come home. So he came home and he's like, let's start walking. And I was like, what? Oh my God, what? And he's like, well, you said you're in labor, so let's get it going. So we took a walk around the neighborhood and I was like, oh my God, I kept having to stop. It's a bad idea to go for a walk.
Right.
And like my mom had been there earlier in the day to hang out with Quinn so I could labor.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very like delicately timing my contractions.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to talk too much through them. And so, yeah, when Jake got home, we kind of kicked it into high gear.
Yeah.
But we went into the birth center at like 4 or 5. And I labored and my midwife gave us all the space and it was amazing. And she came in at one point and I was like, just like chatting, bouncing on the ball. And she's like, how you feel? I'm like, I'm great. And I said, I'm going to vomit. And I just bent over and threw up. And she's like, and I guess we're in transition. Let's go.
Oh.
So then I got into the bath and they had this beautiful giant bathtub. And there's nothing just like hanging out in a bathtub naked with a room full of people fully clothed around you.
Right.
It's really a beautiful experience.
That's not weird at all.
Not weird at all. And I just fell into like this great birth rhythm and it was going so beautifully. Mm-hmm. I started to get pushy. So my midwife was in there listening and hanging out. And then I didn't get pushy again, which if you don't know, pushy is like you get like a little grunty and kind of like more primal where like your body is trying to actively push this child out. And with a second, typically you would have your baby quicker than your first. So when I didn't get pushy again for half an hour, my midwife, Carly, got suspicious. So she came and asked to check me and she was so calm. So she checks me and she gets this really weird look on her face and she sits back on her haunches and she's like, okay, I'm going to need you to be calm and get out of the bath immediately and get your clothes on. I'm going to go call 911.
Oh my
and
God.
I was like, oh, okay.
That just gave me shivers.
The way she said it did not spark any fear or concern in me. All I remember thinking is like, she's serious. I'm going to listen. She's not panicked. I'm not going to panic, but she's serious. And she's like, once you're dressed, I want your hips up and your face down on the bed. I want gravity pushing this baby away from your cervix. And I was like, okay. So when she calls the ambulance, she comes over and she's like, okay, Taya, I need you to listen to me. We're transferring you to the hospital for what's probably going to be an emergency section. Your baby is in face position and it is not safe for you to birth here or to birth, period. We have to get the baby out another way. And I was like, okay. I didn't know what face position was. In my head, I was like, okay, it's breech, right? Like baby's trying to come out feet first or something.
Right. Did she feel the feet or what? Yeah.
No, what she felt. Face position is where instead of coming out with your forehead, which babies do, Willow had craned her neck so far back, she was trying to come out chin first. Ooh. So the fear is as my pubic bone is pushing on her forehead, if she tries to push out, it will snap her neck.
Yeah.
The secondary fear is there will be severe birth defects, trauma. Yeah. So what she felt when she was doing my cervix check was Willow's nose. And then she's like, and then I had you readjust and I felt again. And then Willow sucked her fingertips. And she's like, that was why she got a weird face and like sat back. Cause she's like, what was that?
Yeah.
So
that is insane.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
So we ended up, and of course, still no pain management, right? And at this point, it was like a flip had switched in my head where I was like, I am no longer birthing this baby naturally. Give me drugs.
Yeah.
Because I'm so uncomfortable. And knowing you cannot push because it will harm you and the child. Yeah. And then having to wait. We got caught at a fucking train. So we had to wait for the train. And I thought I was going to snap the bed. Like I was pushing on the bed so hard as I'm working through these contractions, but trying desperately not to push. Jake had to drive the car. He wasn't even I had like my midwife and the EMT. Yeah. Getting into the ER, I was screaming bloody murder. And I remember seeing everyone in the ER and I was like, take a look. This is bad. I was like,
before you have kids, think about it.
Think about this. Then they tried to manually adjust Willow. So once again, someone had their hand way up me, trying to physically move the baby. And she's like, well, that was a non-starter. And I was like, cool, thanks for trying. That was fun.
How quickly did they get you that epidural or that spinal?
Not quickly. Because once they knew they couldn't change the baby,
Right, they're going to try that first.
Yeah, so they did that. The doctors were so complimentary of the midwife for catching that, because that was a really hard thing to catch, being in face presentation, and it is serious. They weren't even sure if Jake was going to be able to be in the room for the birth because they didn't know if they were going to do a spinal or just knock me out. They did get a spinal in, which is, I was always like horrified at the thought of an epidural, like the needle in the spine thing. And the anesthesiologist was so great. I think his name was Scott, and he literally like held my hand the whole time. He's like, it's going to be a bee sting in your back. And I'm like, I'm trying to birth a human the wrong way.
Exactly.
Nothing hurts. But of course, the nerves then kicked in once the drugs did. And they started operating. I started shaking, so they had to strap me down. They had all the warm blankets on me, but I was shivering uncontrollably. Jake got to come into the room, so he's by my head too. Scott is talking to me and he's holding my hand. And it just, for being in, again, a highly medical situation after not wanting that, it was the best possible scenario. Willow came out fine. They brought her over. I got to see her. And then Jake went with her while they finished putting me back together.
Yeah, putting your insides back on the inside.
Yeah. I know Jake at one point looked over and he's like, whoa, that's a lot. It's a lot happening right there. I didn't feel anything from the C-section. It's just a lot of pressure, and like them like yanking your body is just a really odd sensation. And then recovery with that was great. We had such an ordeal trying to leave UW because of all the kidney stuff.
Yeah.
It was really hard to leave. But there I was like, when can I go home? And they're like, you can go home tomorrow. And I was like, when can I get my catheter out? Because I don't want to have another infection. And she's like, well, I can take it out now if you want. And I was like, oh, okay, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so we had a great experience there. Recovering from a C-section is the worst.
I was going to ask, like,
oh, it was the worst.
You know both sides now, so
yeah.
How was it worse than vaginally?
It didn't help that I labored. I know people who go in for a scheduled C-section have a very different recovery because their body is rested.
Right.
But I had been laboring for a day.
Yeah.
And then to have the stress of this situation.
Right. And you were 10 centimeters and you were pushing, so you have all that trauma on your lady bits. And on top of that, you got the C-section trauma.
I really got both. I was like, how can I make this more painful?
Right.
I know.
You really have a flair for laboring.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah.
But I struggled more mentally, I think, with the C-section because it felt like something had happened to my body that I hadn't signed up for.
Yeah. Well,
which I know it's always a risk when you childbirth, nothing is certain. But it felt really violating, kind of.
Yeah. And if you're like, as soon as you're pregnant, I think unless you know that your plan is to have a scheduled C-section, I don't imagine you would imagine having a C-section and like recovering from that, what that would look like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've talked about like my body image issues on the podcast before, right? And that just really threw me for a loop, knowing I wouldn't heal the same and I would be permanently changed from that pooch and that scar, which I've come a long way, but I acknowledge that the first year probably was really hard just to admit that my body wasn't what it was. And I felt very let down by my body. I felt very betrayed because I was like, dude, we could do all these things. We could grow these humans, but you can't birth. Like, you had one job. You had one job to do, and you couldn't do it.
In the whole world.
Right. So
I blame Willow. It's her fault. She wanted to see what was going on before it was her time.
Oh, I know. So those are my birth stories.
I know you've talked about you've had therapy for like your body image issues. Do you feel like that's helped, or do you feel like you would do a tummy tuck?
I think I would, but it wouldn't be for the same reasons. It wouldn't be because I hate my body. I'm coming to terms and appreciating what my body did and realizing that I can love my body the way it is, and that my happiness, my self-esteem, my self-worth isn't tied to what I physically look like. Plus, I already got my boobs done, so I'm like, it's just another surgery.
Great boobs. You're like, what else do I need?
If I have a great stomach too, like, people could not handle it.
Right. It would be too much. It would be too much.
Well, I talked a lot in therapy about like Willow and her body image and how I don't want to pass on any of my insecurities to her, which means I have to deal with my crap now so that I don't. Yeah. And how I talk about my body and how I speak about people's bodies really needs to resonate and be authentic. So I've been working hard on that. One therapist asked me, like, would you talk to Willow about her body the way you talk about your body to yourself? And I was like, hell no, I would never. And she's like, then why do you do it to yourself? Like, oh, that's sobering.
Yeah.
So my goal is to instill in the kids, not that you have to be perfect, but you can appreciate your body for what it is.
Yeah.
And bear, it's like kind of battle, your battle scars, like wear them with
For
pride.
sure. Yeah.
Like, my body did 2 really hard things. I will always have wrinkly skin on my stomach. But it's because I did 2 really hard things.
Yeah.
And I have 2 great things to show for it. So
Right.
I'd rather that be the takeaway than like, yeah, mommy had to get a tummy tuck because she just hated the way her body looked. And no judge. If you do you.
Yeah,
right?
make yourself happy. Be selfish. It's fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I know for me, if I was to do it, it probably wouldn't be 100% for the right reasons. And that's not what I want for my kids.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to set that example. So after having those 2 births, we decided we were very fortunate to have 2 healthy kids, and I was still alive. And so we should probably be done. So hence why we did not have any more children.
I had this question now. So you said that the midwives put you on bed rest with Quinn. So were you on full bed rest like for your last trimester? Or?
No, it was like modified because I was working at my old job during rush, which is right around Christmas. You worked 50 to 70 hour weeks, and I was in a managerial position. So I was there just working. And, I like listen to my body. I think I worked like 55 hours that week instead of 70. But once my midwives said that, they're like, you need to chill. So I went down to 40. And then when it happened again, I talked to my bosses and they put me on customer service at home. So I was able to work from home on my computer. And I think I went into the office like 1 day a week.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So it wasn't full on.
No, it wasn't full on. And work was great.
Well, crazy stories. I love listening to birth stories personally, even though I don't have kids and I don't plan on having any. I will watch any birth story that comes up on like my YouTube. I just find it fascinating. I just think moms are freaking crazy. There's a reason women do this and men don't. Like for sure. Yeah.
I think one thing that has really struck me as I get to know other moms is that everyone has a story worth telling. And that's the whole reason I loved the Birth Hour podcast, is because even if everything went according to plan and it was so easy and you sneezed and the baby came out, like your story is still worth telling. If you had precipitous labor and you gave birth in the back of a bus, like worth telling. But especially the moms whose births went to crap. Your story needs telling, and telling it is so cathartic. Right? We have a couple friends who had traumatic births, and hearing their stories and sitting with them, like I'm sobbing as they're telling these stories because it's so like, I don't know, is it like trauma bonding or
it's just awe-inspiring. Like,
oh man,
wow, you went through that.
Yeah.
Like, how freaking strong are you? And I know that like so many moms go through this and like you were like, I don't know if it was traumatic. Girl, it was freaking traumatic. Like it was. And I feel like moms don't give themselves enough credit because you're like, well, it's just what you have to do. You're a mom. It's what you sign up for. But it's amazing. And seeing the strength of other women.
You don't have time to process it because you're in postpartum mode.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't, there's not time to sit in it and be like, well, that was really crazy what just happened back there. Because you're like, well, I'm not sleeping.
Get this new human. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out nursing and what's happening. And so I think women should tell their birth stories more.
Yeah.
And especially the traumatic ones. I am so grateful I have these notes that I was able to tell Quinn's birth story on that Birth Hour podcast, which was incredible. But I had notes from it. And then with Willow's, I didn't take notes. And even Quinn's, like I had a voice memo that I saved as I talked about his birth right after. And I encourage people to do that. Either write it down or do a voice memo to yourself just to remember, because you won't remember. I thought I would never forget. I've forgotten half of it.
Yeah. That's great advice for a mom. Any other pointers?
Just to educate yourself. Even if you think it's not going to happen to you, just educate yourself. Not that it means it's going to happen to you, but just be prepared and do yourself that favor, because then if a curveball comes, it won't feel like nearly a curveball.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about books real quick.
Okay.
What are you reading?
I am in book 2 of Zodiac Academy, thanks to you.
Yeah. So I read the first Zodiac Academy finally, and we've both heard great things and then terrible things. And I knew I wanted to read a fantasy, so I was like, I'll just get it. I got it from the library.
We'll just gently commit to 25 books.
Right? Um, so I read the first one and I was like, oh my God, it made me feel so many things. So then I said,
You called
Taya,
me.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, you have to read this because I need someone to talk to about it. So come pick it up and read it, please. So I lent you Zodiac Academy. I am now on book 5. And I found out that I bought the second and the third book. Whipped through those, then sent those to Taya. Then I realized they're on Kindle Unlimited. But I was enjoying the physical book so much that as soon as I finished the third one, I bought the fourth and fifth one on Amazon. Even though I can get them for free on my Kindle. It was worth it. I'll say it was worth it. The fourth book ended on such a freaking crazy cliffhanger that I'm so glad I had the fifth.
So now are you worried that the fifth is also going to end on a cliffhanger?
Yes,
so you're going to preemptively buy 6 and 7?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I've heard you described it like this, and I just heard someone on TikTok say it's like the best trashy TV show in a book, but it just hooks you. There's just so much delicious drama that you just have to keep reading. Like I started Red Rising, which I've heard is a great book, and I was thinking about Zodiac Academy while I was reading it, and I was like, I'm just not good. I can't. I'm not in the mental space to give this book, the time and attention it deserves. So I'm just gonna put it away and go back to Zodiac Academy.
Ironically enough, I read the first book and I was like, that was fantastic. It was easy. It was fun. It just transported you to this place. And then I got the third book in the Red Rising series, Golden Sun. And I got like halfway through. And again, I was thinking like, I just really want to go back to Solaria. Like, can we just go back to Zodiac Academy? So I stopped reading it. And not that like Red Rising is an incredible series, and I read the cliff notes and I'm like, well, damn, I really should have finished the book. A lot happened. But it was just like, it's more of like a heavy drama, world building, space battles, which you don't understand half of what's happening anyway, versus just like this like Gossip Girl, fun, flirty, dark. Like you said, it's delicious. I am so thoroughly into it. So I stopped reading Golden Sun and I'm back into Zodiac Academy.
I heard someone say the writing is terrible. Honestly, I don't think the writing's that bad. I'm interested. No, and as even though there's 600 or 700 pages or whatever, I am interested the whole time.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it.
No, there's always something going on, and nothing feels like it. Like there's like a lull period or anything.
Right.
Here's
the
always
thing.
Something.
I don't need my books to be Pulitzer Prize winners.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Exactly. I need to be entertained. Yes. If the writing's great, great. If it's not, then whatever.
Yes, 100%.
Honestly, I don't like flowery language in these long, poetic, like, nope. Just say what you mean and use descriptive language when needed.
I was just reading a book, and I think I texted you about it, but I feel like the author used all this flowery, fluffy language to describe something that could have been described so much more simply, and it kind of came off as like pretentious, like they're trying too hard. They're trying to sound smart and eloquent, and it was losing me. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I just want to be entertained. Yeah. I don't need works of art.
When a sentence is an entire paragraph, I'm like, I don't even understand the point. I think I'm an intelligent person, but I don't need to be spoken to that way. Talk down to me.
Pretend I'm a fifth grader. No, especially if topic is not that serious. I definitely don't need a fancy fantasy book.
Yeah.
So anyways.
So we'll be talking about Zodiac Academy for the next year.
I've been freaking loving it. Well, that is it for our episode. Thank you so much, Taya, for sharing that. I hope that helps women out there. If you've gone through your own story, I
would love to hear people's stories, because I think especially in light of current world conditions and the state of women's healthcare, I think it's really important that it does get attention and it does get its proper moment. And so I would love to hear people's stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Send them to us. Our email is still tffopodcast@gmail.com. If you have a story and it's long-winded, great. Send it to us, email us. Yeah. We would love to hear it. I think it's important to talk about.
Next week, we have a 2-part interview with our friend Portia. She goes into leaving an abusive relationship and healing from that trauma. We're really happy that she shared, and we're excited to give her story the moment it deserves as well.
Yeah, that was a good one. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye.